This is Bix Weir, roadtoroot.com. This is a presentation I gave at the Anarchapulco Conference on February 19th, 2018. The presentation is called Golden Oldies to the Crypto Future, an alternative version of the past, present, and future of our global monetary system based on the road to the root of theory. And you can find more information, backup information, at roadtoroot.com. What I want to talk about is gold and the Federal Reserve. Like most people, I first opened my eyes to what was going on behind the scenes by learning about the Federal Reserve System, how corrupt it was, how they are a privately owned institution. Reading the book, Creature from Jekyll Island was a big eye-opener for me. And it was my red pill. Everybody has kind of their red pill that they can remember when they first opened their eyes to the secrets going on behind the scenes. And the Creature of Jekyll Island was definitely my red pill. But there was a problem, and I will get into that problem. So I am going to entitle this part of the discussion, Digesting the Red Pill. Once you open your eyes to what is going on, it is important to keep digging and keep finding out more information about why things happen, how they're being operated, and where it's leading us. So today we will be digesting the red pill. First, a little about the road to root of theory. The road to root of theory postulates that there is a group of people in the United States as well as around the world that are working to remove and destroy the financial banking powers that have secretly controlled all aspects of our lives for hundreds of years. I call them the good guys. Many people call them white hats, or there are many different names for the people. And these aren't just people working on the exact same thing. Many people around the world and in many other places are working to free humanity from the control, the manipulation, the evil forces that have controlled us for a long time. So the road to root theory is what sprang from my investigation over the last 15 years into this situation. And during the speech, I gave away one silver coin to anybody who could answer the questions that I sent out, and it was very, very fun, and people were excited about getting a silver coin. I do not sell these to the public. What I do is I give them away to every private road member at the Road to Ruta for signing up for the private road, a 1-year subscription. These coins are really cool, absolutely double strike. They have this luster on them, and they're all individually numbered. So people were very excited to get the coins, and in the live version of this speech, it was quite raucous when the questions came out. So here's the first question. Where did the word Ruta come from? A character in a Federal Reserve Bank comic book. B, a term used in computer programming. C, the basis of our electronic financial system. D, Alan Greenspan. Or E, all of the above. And I believe a Road to Root subscriber got this one right. It is E, all of the above. So this is a Federal Reserve Bank comic book that was released originally in 1981 and then redone in 2007, and it was released on January 1st, 2007. Yes, the Federal Reserve does have comic books. This is the most bizarre comic you will ever read in your life, but there's absolutely a hidden meaning in this comic, a meaning about the need for scarcity, the need for gold in a monetary system. And once I analyzed this comic and really got my head around what it meant, it blew my mind that the Federal Reserve Bank, of all things, of all non-gold type things, really did have a secret agenda, and it was playing out to this very day. So on January 1st, this is what the website looked like. Each of these comics, and why I was there on January 1st is anybody's guess, but this is the exact day because I was there before, and this comic book was not listed on the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston website. So it was January 1st, 2007. And they were both posted with 2 big red exclamation points after them. Clearly somebody wanted somebody to find this, and amazingly, that's what I did. Check out the gold, or the red exclamation points right there. Below that is the website. You can still find these comic books there, at least the updated version. Took a bit of searching to find the original version, the 1981 version, but you can still go to the Wishes and Rainbows site on the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston website, and it's under educational resources is where you'll find it, or just do a search for Wishes and Rainbows in the search function. So this is what kind of the comic book looks like. It's about a story about a little girl named Ruta, and that was really puzzled me. Where did they come up with that name? And Ruta lives in a world of no color, very afraid of the big people who might step on her, and has this mentor / grandmother who talks about the need for a gold standard and the need for color in life and scarcity and how they value scarcity in life. Really, really interesting stuff. But so I looked up the term Ruta, Roota, Ruta. Hard to find anything until I came across this. In computer programming, computer science, a tree is a widely used abstract data type, an ADT, that simulates a hierarchical tree structure with a root value and subtrees of children with a parent node. Remember that word node represents as a set of linked nodes. So this is a conceptual picture of what the root structure in computer programming looks like. Each letter represents a node. The arrows from one node to the other are called edges. The topmost node at the very top there with no incoming edges is known as the root, or node A, also known as root A, Ruta. The bottom nodes with no edges are the leaves, nodes D, I, G, and J. So that's what in computer programming, that's what root A is. And then I found this in a 1971 IBM manual on financial computing. This diagram is about how to program a computer to understand financial terms, and it just struck me as very odd. There's that name Ruta, and I really couldn't find much about Ruta anywhere on the internet. And I was digging through manuals. I wanted to learn about the computer programming aspect, as I did some computer programming in the 80s. So I kind of remembered a little bit about it, but not really. And then I found this, and it really does show off that computer programmers use the term root A in the very basis of our monetary system. And then we got into someone who most people don't know was a computer programmer, Alan Greenspan, of all people. Very, very interesting person. Most people know him from the Federal Reserve, how he would just babble on and not make much sense. That was actually his job, was to not make much sense. He was trying to throw people off the scent of what was really going on. And Alan Greenspan specialized in something called econometrics, which is the use of computers in statistical theory and mathematical statistics to evaluate and develop economic methods. He was a childhood friend of John Kemeny, who created the first shareable computer program called BASIC. And they were really competitive childhood friends as to who was smarter, and they were both brilliant in their own right. In Alan Greenspan's book, The Age of Turbulence, Greenspan blames himself for the Y2K problem. And remember, the Y2K problem was somebody originally had programmed 2 digits for the year instead of 4. At the time when he was writing these programs in the 60s and 70s, Greenspan didn't really fully understand how embedded computer programming would be. So it didn't really click to him to program with 4 digits for the year when it changed over to 2000 from the 1900s. Really interesting stuff. So yes, when Al Gore said I invented the internet, it was seen as a joke. When Alan Greenspan says I invented, which he never did, I invented the unbacked financial electronic computer monetary system, he actually did do that. This guy Lowell, in Greenspan's office in Manhattan, he had a secret computer lab. attached to his office. So he had his regular office where he would meet clients, and right next to it was a door leading to another room which had all the computers. And there was a computer lab. This guy named Lowell Wolfbank, a member of Ayn Rand's collective, ran the computer hardware. He was known as the overpaid copy boy, because none of the secretaries or other people working in the office knew why this guy got paid so much, because all he was, he was an overpaid copy boy. They didn't even know what computer programming was back then, but they just saw Lowell in there all the time. They thought he was just making copies when he was actually operating the computer hardware and running the punch cards in the beginning, and then the computer software. And through Alan Greenspan's mentor, Arthur Burns, who was the head of the Federal Reserve System, Greenspan was able to secretly control all market prices via computer market rigging and derivatives from the early 1970s. Market controls continue today using the Exchange Stabilization Fund and prime dealer banks, with the CFTC and the SEC providing regulatory cover for the manipulation. So all markets have been under control of these computer program simulations, basically, and they control every single market that we have that is electronically based, which is almost all of them. And just to prove the point, in 1985, Alan Greenspan did a TV commercial as well as some print ads for Apple Computer. And Alan Greenspan was the only other spokesman for Apple Computer besides Steve Jobs, which is amazing to this day. It's just Steve Jobs used to talk about Apple Computer, and now, and that's it. And the only other guy was Alan Greenspan, who was the world's most, not world renowned, because he was doing this all in secret for the most part. But he was absolutely a computer programming expert in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And that is the reason they put the world's biggest gold bug in charge of the Federal Reserve in 1987 to rig and control the system. And if you think about it, 2 months after Greenspan got put as the head of the Fed, you had the gigantic market crash known as Black Monday, which happened in 1987. And it was all caused by computer program triggered trading. And voila, behind the scenes, there's the man pulling the levers with the great and powerful laws with computers. Crazy. Okay, so we're in the process of digesting the red pill, and now you know that there is something else going on at the Fed. There is this secret plan to control markets, for one, to prolong the unbacked fiat system, and then ultimately destroy markets. So why, on December 23rd, 1913, Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act. And let's get more into the Fed and why this was even allowed. It was late at night, December 23rd, 1913. Anybody who's read Creature from Jekyll Island knows about this conspiracy. If you haven't read it, very important to read this book. But Woodrow Wilson wasn't a shill of the bankers. It's very bizarre. As a matter of fact, here's what Woodrow Wilson said in his book right before he got elected. He said, "Our great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Therefore, all our activities are in the hands of a small group of men who chill and check true economic freedom. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, completely controlled, and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of the majority, but a government of the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Now, why would someone who believes this sign the Federal Reserve Act? Question number 2, and this is the second coin I gave out. Why did Woodrow Wilson sign the Federal Reserve Act? A, he was corrupt and aligned with the bankers. B, he didn't know what he was doing. C, he was blackmailed. Or D, he was afraid of something. And the answer was D, he was afraid of something. This is very clear, and I'll tell you now what he was afraid of. Like I said, what was Woodrow Wilson afraid of? This is what he was afraid of. On June 19th, 2012, cover of the New York Times, this story came out. Tell of vast riches in the Grand Canyon. Men engaged in gold dredging operations expect to astonish the world. Have overcome obstacles. Steamboat placed in the Great Chasm. Large capital only can So that was the cover, and it went on to talk about within the article a lot of things. But here's the most important thing it talks about. F.D. Watson, who has been conducting operations for the Chicago concern, has come out of Lee's Ferry to report to his principals and make further arrangements to carry on the work. He declares that when the whole field has been developed, the supply of gold in the world will have been increased by billions. That's with an S, billions. I know that it will be difficult to comprehend that I have a correct conception of the wealth that is buried in the banks of the Colorado Canyon, he says, but I can demonstrate every statement I make to be absolutely true, and that my chief shortcoming is an inability to comprehend the vastness of the riches that lie along this great stream. Up the Colorado River, 150 miles, there's another great outcropping of the silt, which is being developed by a concern largely financed in the city and in Denver. This extends for more than 18 miles. Then it dips down and has been traced only once before the deposit at Lee's Ferry is again found. It is believed that other deposits can be tapped in Marble Canyon if that is ever made accessible. Remember, this is the early 1900s. The Grand Canyon literally was almost uninhabitable, and it was very hard to get to. Extremely. There weren't roads. You can't land a helicopter in the Grand Canyon. There weren't even helicopters. So it was just as remote as you could possibly get. Now here's the problem with finding billions and billions of ounces. In 1912, there was only 64 million ounces in the United States Treasury. And here's a table showing that. And the total gold reserves in 1913 for all central banks was 160 million ounces. 160 million ounces total in the world, and yet they have found billions and billions and billions of ounces of gold in the Grand Canyon. Here's one of the consequences. This was the consequence of the gold rush in the 1850s, where they found about, for the U.S., the gold supply increased about 70%. And what it did is cause hyperinflation. As you can see from this consumer price index, the CPI was actually the real CPI back then. It wasn't the fake one we have today, at least I think. Now, obviously, all those numbers are faked. So the ramifications of billions of ounces of gold added to the supply. Number one, the banks and the mega rich, asset value destruction. Remember, the banks and the mega rich and governments are the ones that held most of the gold. They would instantly see the value of their gold depreciate. It would be a total implosion of the monetary system. Obviously, most of the world was on a gold or silver standard. Massive hyperinflation because of all the gold that gets released into the system. And they would have to replace the current monetary system. Perhaps that's why silver is so rigged and so manipulated even more than gold, is because that would be the obvious alternative to a gold standard that got destroyed because billions of ounces were put into that system. Social orders would have been overturned and governments would have been overthrown. All this stuff would have happened. Woodrow Wilson was confronted with this. He went out to the Grand Canyon or had his people go out there to confirm it, and it was absolutely true. So what happened next? The Federal Reserve was created to, quote, deal with the problem. The Chicago and Denver financiers of the Grand Canyon Gold abruptly shut down all mining operations. Woodrow Wilson created the National Park Service. The Grand Canyon was nationalized by designating it the second U.S. national park. Woodrow Wilson banned all mining in the Grand Canyon. 80% of the Grand Canyon is still off limits to hikers. It's unbelievable that people don't jump up and down. You're allowed to go out on this cliff and look over the Grand Canyon. You're not allowed to go and explore around there. There's a couple trails and paths that you're allowed to go down. The donkey ride down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. But you're not allowed to go everywhere. And it's all cordoned off. And to this day, it's still there. And interesting that 90% of all caves in the Grand Canyon have not been explored. Question number 3. Is the Grand Canyon Gold Conspiracy A, real, B, a myth, or C, both? And the person who answered this question said A, real, but it was actually C, both. And these are pictures I took of the Grand Canyon Gold. No, they're not pictures I took of the Grand Canyon Gold. These are actually pictures. It's pretty cool, but this is kind of what it would look like if these stories are true. Those pictures are from a movie called McKenna's Gold. Really interesting movie. And it very much in line with the Grand Canyon Gold article that came out in the New York Times and the article on Egyptian artifacts that was found. It was written in about the same time, the early 1900s, in the Arizona Gazette, which talks about this find of Egyptian artifacts in these caves in the Grand Canyon. So check out this movie called McKenna's Gold. And an interesting fact about this is that a lot of McKenna's Gold kind of follows the path of how the Egyptian artifacts were found, at least as reported in the Arizona Gazette. But that Arizona Gazette article wasn't found until the 1990s, and McKenna's Gold was made in the 1960s. So really interesting how that story is so much in line with the old Grand Canyon Gold article and the Arizona Gazette Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. So let's talk about the myth first. A myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of people or explaining some cultural or social phenomenon. If you've done any history of hidden gold mines or Hopi Indian traditions, there's a place called Cibolo that the Hopi called a city of gold. There's also this, and this is right in the same area. And this area is the confluence of the Colorado River and the Little Colorado River. At a place called Lee's Ferry is where they built a river crossing, because it's almost 100 miles either way. It's almost uncrossable, especially back then. Remember, no roads, primitive crossings were available, but Lee's Ferry was pretty much the only way to cross for 100 miles either way. And it's the area of Sapapapu, which is the Hopi Indians' hole where where their ancestors emerged. The Hopi tradition talks of the Hopi having to go underground and living with the ant people in caves. And then, are there Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon? Absolutely. And if you look at the $1 back of the one, and also the mountains, all the mountains in the Grand Canyon are named after Egyptian gods. And the back of our $1 bill still shows this pyramid. And nobody even questions why a pyramid is on the back of the $1 bill. But you can see in the pyramid, in the back of the $1 bill, clearly on the ground there are bushes. And I don't recall seeing any bushes and leaves and foliage around the base of the Egyptian pyramids. But clearly something is going on that we're not allowed to know about. So what is going on? Let's find out. Is the Grand Canyon story that was published on June 19th in 2012, is it real? Or is it maybe just a fake story? Fake in order to force Woodrow Wilson to sign the Federal Reserve Act. Although I wouldn't think Woodrow Wilson would fall for something that was fake. And I can easily prove that it's not fake. Let's start with the steamboat. Was there a steamboat placed in the Great Chasm of the Grand Canyon? Absolutely, and here it was. It was built in, actually, it's called the Charles H. Spencer, and it was built in San Francisco, brought by train to about 100 miles away, the closest train depot, and then by horse and cart and buggy, and it had to be assembled on site in the heart of the Grand Canyon. Crazy stuff. But this is a picture of it in 1911 when they were building the steamship. And the steamship was used to carry coal from about 20 miles upriver, back and down, because they needed coal to run the hydraulic systems that they were using on the gold and the banks and the walls of the Grand Canyon. And this is the Charles H. Spencer that's tied up on the Grand Canyon. in this picture is in 1912. This is when they finished building the steamship, and this is what was reported on the front page of the New York Times. And voila! By 1951, it had been put out of commission, and it was sitting on the side of the Colorado River. There it is. Can you imagine? It took 6 months to get that steamboat out to California and set up. Huge cost, just gigantic cost to do this. And there's also a 100-foot barge that went with it. Crazy that they just stopped, automatically, instantly stopped. And you can find a lot of information. I found a lot of information in this report. There's a picture of the steamship in 1962. This is where I found a lot of information about that steamship called the Charles J. Spencer. This is a report in 1987 by the Glen Canyon National Recreational Area. They were trying to get the site and the steamship certified as a submerged cultural resource. And this is like a 150-page report. It goes into how it was built, the problems they had getting it there, and all this stuff, and why it is such an important thing. I would say the background is that it's not so important. It was just a steamship that was built for fun on one of the toughest parts of the Colorado River. But I would submit that it was a gigantic deal building this in order to mine the gold in the Grand Canyon and then just shut it down. So in 1930, there was a Supreme Court case, U.S. versus Utah, that fought over mining rights on the riverbanks of the Colorado River. And again, everybody says, oh, no, it's just a beautiful national park. No, it is a huge resource area, mainly gold. There's also some silver there. And this court case has sworn testimony from people who worked the gold mine that it was prematurely shut down. And a lot of the guys said they had no idea why, but all the funding was pulled away, and then Woodrow Wilson locked it up and said no mining in that area. All right, now let's move back to the Road to Ruta comics. This is a really interesting picture within the comic of Ruta, who is Alan Greenspan, talking to his grandmother, who is represented by Arthur Burns, which is Greenspan's mentor. And I get into this in the Road to Ruta analysis. You can find it at roadtoruta.com, the very top video. And Ruta asks his grandmother, why doesn't anybody go to Colorland to bring back colors, meaning why don't we go back to a gold standard? And the grandmother says, because the people who live in Colorland are very big and might accidentally step on any pebble person who visits. All our people are afraid to go there. Now, this is the Federal Reserve Bank talking about this. What could the Federal Reserve Bank be afraid of? And it goes on, and this is the part I want to emphasize. And besides, nobody knows how to reach Colorland. Some say you can get there through the caves near Cobblestone Canyon. Cobblestone Canyon is the name of a canyon in the Road to Ruta comic books where they find gold. Unbelievable. And then Ruta says, I'm not afraid, Grandma. I often play in those caves, and someday I will find a way to bring Colorland back to the people. And it's really, really, really interesting that they use these caves, because it's almost exactly the same as what was going on in the Grand Canyon. And then here we have when Ruta and Rocky is Lowell Wolfbank, Greenspan's computer hardware guy, they find the gold in the Grand Canyon in what they call Cobblestone Canyon. And this is the Federal Reserve Bank. Remember, Federal Reserve doesn't like gold, doesn't deal with gold. Remember Ben Bernanke said, "Oh, we just keep it for historical purposes." It's ridiculous. It is the number one basis for the last 100 years of why the Federal Reserve was allowed to exist. And then Ruta takes the colored flower home, and the colored flowers need the golden sunlight. And here's a really interesting thing, back to that movie McKenna's Gold. In the movie, they find the gold, and then there's a rock slide that covers up the gold, and same thing's happening here with Ruta and Rocky down the bottom. A rock slide has closed off the whole tunnel, and now what do we do? And they find more gold somewhere else, which the U.S. government has at Chocolate Mountain. They found another in California. They found another huge gold mine, Just the parallels are unprecedented. Okay, we're still digesting the Fed red pill. See, there's a lot going on behind the scenes now. Question number 4, was the Grand Canyon gold ever used? A, yes, and it's all gone. B, no, it's still there. C, some was utilized, but most is still there. And D, it's all a crazy conspiracy theory. And the answer is C, some was utilized, but most is still there. I believe. It could be even A and C, but I really think some is left because they have not done significant work, but they have mobilized some of it, and I'll go into how. I know. In 1934, or just recently, a whole bunch of gold-backed bonds were found, trillions of dollars, and there has been some suggestion that these are all fake, and that's what the Federal Reserve said when somebody tried to cash some in, is these are all fake. But it really calls into question, it's clear that these boxes and the certificates and all that are very old, and they would, if anybody carbon dated it, probably would very easily see that these are dated at least 70, 80 years prior to now. So they weren't invented now. They were made in probably the 1930s. And the intricacy of the boxes that they were held in, and the parchment, and the amount of work that went into this is just phenomenal. And it was not easy to do back in 1934, all the printing of these certificates, and it was amazing that they did this. They hid them away, and all of a sudden it's found. So is it fake? I don't think so. These are gold-backed bonds. And I don't think these are fake at all. I think they are the real deal. They might have been already cashed in, which I'll get into in a second. But these are definitely something that are real, because no one would spend all the money to have this done for no reason. Because clearly the Fed today isn't going to cash these in. So it isn't someone with a lot of great technology to make things look old, and they're going to spend a couple $100,000 to have these things put together. And there's a lot of them, trillions of dollars in gold-backed bonds. Really interesting stuff, but it gives credence to potentially maybe the Fed in 1934 when they confiscated gold at the end of 33, and now they're issuing these gold-backed bonds around the world. Absolutely makes sense if you have gold in the Grand Canyon and can prove it. You're not going to mine it, but you can mobilize that gold by using gold-backed bonds. And who would accept them? Someone who's been there, someone who's checked out the gold in the Grand Canyon to verify that it's real. Now here's where we get into a really bizarre part at the International Association of Cryptographic Research. They have one of these mystery gold bars that nobody knows what they are. There's 7 gold bars that have cryptography on them, Chinese writing, U.S. writing, and they speak of a $300 million loan. That the Chinese, a loan of the gold loan that the Chinese lent the U.S. In exchange for what? Probably those gold-backed bonds. But it's really interesting about these bars, and nobody has been able to decipher them, so they're one of the top 10 mysteries yet to be solved. And here's one of the gold bars that talks about the $300 million loan. You can see the computer, or the numerical and letters and all the cryptography stuff on it, which hasn't been deciphered. And there's Chinese writing and English. But here's a really interesting bar. Check out on the left side. And first of all, look at those. There's an airplane over there, which will be very significant. And all the cryptography. And then it looks like it's layers of gold right here in the bottom with the wiggly lines. Is that a stream? I don't know. Let's think about it though, and check out these symbols, the 0 with a slash through it, and I'll talk about that in a second. But also that these zeros with slash through it looks like it's about half empty. Was gold mobilized from the Grand Canyon? The real stuff, I don't know. But look at this. Here's another bar, and it looks like, unbelievably, it looks like a canyon on the right side, and it looks like a plane crash right above it. Remember that plane? And then the cryptography, and everything else is really clear except that thing. And it really kind of does look like 2 planes crashing right above a canyon. and then the zeros are, for the most part, almost empty of the gold. Really, really interesting stuff. And when you connect that with this, the worst commercial plane crash in history happened in 1956. 128 people died up to that point, and they supposedly crashed right above the very spot where they found the gold in the Grand Canyon. Unbelievable, and it's just an amazing story. And how two plane crashes that were leaving from the same airport, one's going to Chicago, one's going to Kansas City, completely different routes, they crash in that exact same spot. A little too conspiratorial, but hey, stranger things have happened. So what happened? There's the route of those doomed airliners, and they cross right above the exact spot where the gold is. What happened was they had to shut down that area, the Grand Canyon, and they used 12 heavy lift helicopters over a 2-week period for supposedly cleaning up the parts of both aircraft. No, there was no plane crash. They used the helicopters to get the gold out, in my opinion. And they couldn't do it without causing a lot of ruckus, so they made up this story. And you go back to those gold bars, and that's exactly what it looked like happened. All right, we're still digesting the red pill, and we'll keep going. So much going on behind the scenes of the Fed. It's not just Federal Reserve bad guys and out to kill us and steal our money. There's a different agenda going on. And yes, there are bad people at the Fed, but it's important to understand why the Fed was created and where it will lead us. And that's the key. Question number 5, when will the Federal Reserve end the manipulation? A, never. We're screwed forever. B, not very soon, as it would be too disruptive. C, this year, 2018, the takedown kicks in high gear. Or D, it will take decades or centuries to end fiat money. Again, somebody picked an answer that I don't think is right. It was close to right, so I think I gave them a coin anyway. And they picked B, not very soon, as it would be too disruptive. I mean, it's been 100 years that they've been, the Fed and the U.S. government has allowed this to go on because ending that system would be too disruptive. But the answer is C, this year, 2018. And it kicks into high gear. And here's why. Here we go. Ready for your conspiracy stuff? The 1988 Economist magazine had the gold medallion around its neck, and it had a 2018 on it, and it said, get ready for a world currency. A lot of people confuse this with a one world government. No, it says world currency. Now, let's look at the zero with the line through it. Yep, it's right there, just like on the gold bar, on those gold bars talking about the gold in the Grand Canyon. The cover of The Economist on this very same topic, the situation. When will the gold in the Grand Canyon be released? And there it is, that same symbol right on the coin. Really cool stuff. And there it is on the in the Grand Canyon. Amazing, amazing. That this all links together at the Federal Reserve. It's why the Federal Reserve was created, why it's allowed to exist for this long. The letter zero with the line through it is sometimes used in mathematics as a replacement for the symbol. It's known as an empty set, as established by Bourbaki, and sometimes in linguistics as a replacement for the same symbol representing zero. The zero symbol is always drawn with a slash circle, whereas in most typefaces, the letter O is a slashed ellipse. It kind of looks like me also, and Cliff Hayes and I have had discussions about this. It could even mean the introduction of a computer-based system because that's how a zero is represented in the early computer programming. Okay, let's get into a little more conspiracy stuff. On the cover of The Economist magazine, I've done 2 articles at roadrunner.com analyzing the 2016 and 2017 Economist magazine. Amazing stuff in there, all kinds of stuff. But look at this one. On the cover in 2016, there's a flying cell phone in the back left to represent the cryptos. But what I want to point out is the inside the cover is a bigger picture, and look who's right in the middle on the bottom. It's Alan Greenspan fading away, pulling his last computer level, and it's switching over from 2000. They kind of block out the 18. Again, this came out in 2016. and it looks kind of like a slot machine, or it could be the machine that the great and powerful Oz was using to destroy the world's monetary system to return to a gold-backed system. Um, an interesting point here is that Alan Greenspan left the Federal Reserve in January of 2017 or 2007, and then we had the meltdown at the end of 2008, and then Bitcoin was released to humanity right at the end of 2008, beginning of 2009. Satoshi Nakamoto said that he had been working on this problem for 2 years. Alan Greenspan, when he left the Fed, and he's still the world's best computer programmer, had 2 years between when he left the Fed and when the introduction of the Satoshi white paper came out. Is that a conspiracy theory? Absolutely. Could Alan Greenspan really be Satoshi Nakamoto? Well, he was the world's best computer programmer since the 60s. He was heavily involved in the monetary system. The Fed, we all know the Fed's been involved with the cryptocurrency system since the 80s. Could it have been Alan Greenspan? Who in the world would be the only person who couldn't stand up and say, yes, I am Satoshi? I would say Alan Greenspan, the head of the Federal Reserve System, the anti-crypto system. Now, a lot of people will say, oh my God, Alan Greenspan is Satoshi. That means it's all bad. And they're going to take over the monetary system and take over Bitcoin. No, I don't think so. I think Alan Greenspan was always working for the good guys. Remember Ruta sitting on her grandmother's lap saying, I can fight these bad guys who want to step on us. So I absolutely think he was involved, if not the Satoshi. And if he was Satoshi, he clearly couldn't come out and say, I'm Satoshi Nakamoto. All right, more red pill digestion. What has been the underlying cause of all market crashes since 1970? Market participants over speculation. B, bankster pump and dumps. C, computer-generated algorithm chaos. Or D, natural flow of freely traded markets. It is C, computer-generated trading algorithm chaos. You can go back to every big market crash since 1987 when Greenspan got on the Fed, and they were all caused by computer trading. This is his last hurrah, Alan Greenspan 2008 stock market crash. This is what Senator Kanjorski said right after the crash. An electronic run on banks happened on September 15, 2008, draining $500 billion from the money market funds in 1 hour. Had the Fed not acted to bail out the banks, the entire banking system would have been drained in a matter of hours, destroying the world economy and governments. That's how big this stuff is. All right, let's digest a little further. Now, where do we go? I've taken you from where the Fed started, what's going on at the Federal Reserve behind the scenes, why it's been allowed to exist for so long, and that Alan Greenspan is trying to get us out of it, and he wants to go back onto a gold standard or a different way. So are the cryptocurrencies the way out of this mess? Absolutely. Question number 7, why are the cryptocurrencies allowed to exist in the United States? A, the banking cabal doesn't see cryptocurrencies as a threat. B, there is no way to stop them. C, a parallel crypto economy offers a less volatile way out of the old system. Or D, the bad guys will use cryptos to usher in their one world government mark of the beast system. Those that see the bad in everything will say D. I don't think they are correct. A, they do see it as a threat, absolutely. B, there's no way to stop them. I would say there is no way to stop the cryptos, but there's ways to delay it for decades. If every country came out and said, nope, we're going to call them illegal, we're going to confiscate anyone we find using it. We're going to go to all the people we know who have cryptocurrencies, who have talked about it, and take theirs. We're going to shut down all exchanges. They could do that, and it would delay cryptocurrencies for decades, the growth of them. But they're not doing that. And the answer is C, a parallel crypto economy offers a less volatile way out of the old system. Absolutely. The U.S. and the Fed have been looking for ways to get out for a long, long, long time. And just to reinforce that fact, the CFTC Commissioner Chairman Chris Giancarlo testified in front of the Senate Banking Committee on February 6, 2018, and he was so pro-crypto, it was unbelievable. Talking about how his daughter's into cryptocurrencies. I had been told when Chris Giancarlo joined the CFTC that he was going to do the work of the white hats. Absolutely, I was like, but it related to silver, so I expect a lot of action in silver as well. But this guy is so pro crypto, and the U.S. is not going to stop the cryptos. There's some quotes from his written testimony. We're entering a new digital era in the world financial markets. As we saw with the development of the internet, we cannot put technology genie back in the bottle. Virtual currencies mark a paradigm shift in how we think about payments, traditional financial processes, and engaging in economic activity. This is the head of the CFTC saying this. And now he's going to lay down laws to protect the cryptos. Listen to this. With the proper balance of sound policy, regulatory oversight, and private sector innovation, new technologies will allow American markets to evolve in responsible ways and continue to grow our economy and increase prosperity. Bravo, Chris Giancarlo. The very next day, another new CFTC board member, Brian Quintes, said at a Yahoo Finance Crypto Summit, quote, he's talking about Giancarlo. He said he took the first opportunity he had as chairman of the agency to bring fintech expertise in-house so we have a method of communicating with the financial community and innovators. Our approach around this topic is we want to be forward-thinking and we want to be open to new ideas. And then he said, I think Bitcoin and blockchain are transformative. We'll remember when the chairman's testimony and in all the follow-on results that this concept will create down the road. Quote, it's going to affect everything we have. This is the CFTC. Awesome. So it's such a vindication of the road to Rooter theory, especially that there are good guys behind the scenes working to take out the bad guys. So the final question was, why is Cliff High so bullish on the future of cryptocurrencies? I am a big fan of Cliff High, and why is he so bullish? A, because he owns a lot of them. B, because they permeate his webbot data for the next 100 years. C, because his data has humans using cryptocurrencies in space. D, because we need them for the transition out of the dying fiat system. Or E, because he enjoys our monthly Three Amigos discussion. Or F, is it all of the above? Of course, it is all of the above. Yes, he owns cryptocurrencies. Yes, the cryptocurrencies has been in his data long before Bitcoin was even released, long before the white paper. Cliff had been looking for this thing that he could not name within his data, a new form of money that was decentralized and run by the people. And then he found it in 2009 with that's when he came across Bitcoin, the white paper, and all that. So it's all of the above. So winding down this talk, and hopefully I've taken you from the beginnings of the Federal Reserve, why it was kept in secret, why all this insanity was allowed to happen, all the way to the solution, which is the future. And here's Cliff High's Bitcoin price roadmap for 2018. He's got a number 13,888 Bitcoin by late February, early March 2018. This prediction was the data set was from 2016, late 2016. So it's been over about a year and a half since the 13,888 number has been in his data. We'll see, but that if he hits that number at some point in the next couple of weeks, the end of February or beginning of March, that would be just phenomenal. And then further in the same data sets, 40,000 Bitcoin by the summer of 2018. He's got the $64,000 question by September of 2018, and then 100,000 Bitcoin parties at the end of the year. All this showed up in his data from over a year and a half ago, and it's crazy. So a lot of people ask me, what about the other cryptos? Cliff says very clearly that with all cryptos and the tokens, rising tide lifts all boats. As Bitcoin rises and is more adapted, so are all the cryptos. And Bitcoin could be BTC Core, or could be BTC Cash, could be all of the above. I would argue that 13,888 was already hit in mid-February. When you add up all the forks, it came out to right around 13,888. Not exactly, but that's not how Cliff's data works. Cliff's data works that people will be talking about 13,888. And I think I was talking about it in Cliff. So yeah, great news for those in cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. throughout 2018, it would be a huge year. If these numbers are hit, absolutely the rest of the world will start really to get on board, which I believe they are. And then I gave Ruta's top 5 cryptos for 2018. These are my favorite picks for various reasons, and I think they'll go up the most compared to other cryptos. Litecoin is a necessary means of exchange. Bitcoin Core decided to shed their means of exchange because it got too complicated, too costly, and too slow because of SegWit and all that debacle. So I love Litecoin, and that's my number 1 pick for 2018. Number 2, Veritasium. Veritasium, a peer-to-peer exchanges. It will replace the corrupt capital markets. Reggie Middleton is working on the Jamaican Stock Exchange to start, and then he's going to the DAX. The DAX is the German stock exchange they're talking to about implementing Veritasium-based peer-to-peer exchange. It's going to be unbelievable. Bitcoin Cash, because I think Bitcoin Cash will ultimately be more useful than Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin Cash will catch up to where Bitcoin is going, which means a larger increase in percentage-wise for your investment this year. And it's what Satoshi would want. In the argument between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, a locked up version of virtual gold, was never even mentioned in Satoshi's white paper. It was a peer-to-peer cash system. So it's more aligned with Satoshi, aka potentially Alan Greenspan. If Greenspan wasn't Satoshi, he was definitely involved with the group that was developed Bitcoin. Number 4, Amizigo. It's an Asian coin that's going to basically be a platform to bank the unbanked. That is gigantic. I think it's 2.5 billion people are unbanked, and Amizigo is going to get in there and bank those people, completely go around the banksters. And Cliff High's data has Amizigo going up 30,000x or 30,000%. I think it was 30,000%. Crazy stuff. And then Salt Lending, one of my favorite coins, because it really is a bridge coin from the old system to a new system. Yes, they have to get all the approvals from the state and local federal regulators, but it is happening, and I think by June, Salt Lending will be a monster, and people will be using the Salt Lending platform to take out crypto loans. There's over 60,000 people in line to get crypto loans at Salt Lending, so definitely check that one out. And I have been mainly doing, finally doing YouTube videos for the last year and a half or so, because it really is a different way to get your message out there. I was a writer for a very long time, and in researching this discussion, I had to go through the archives of the Road to Ruta, and I found this article I wrote a long time ago. And you can go to roadtoruta.com and check out all the things we got. At the bottom of each section, there's archives, and you can go back in time and see what I was talking about since, since early 2000 in my fight with GATA. But I wrote this article, and I think it's very important, even to this day. I remember when I wrote it, probably about 10 years ago. And it's called, "Are You Ready for This, America?" We have arrived at a point in our nation's history that will define how our future will unfold. There are now only 2 roads left to take. The first road continues our relentless pursuit of power, control, and manipulation that can only spell destruction in our future. Destruction of our liberties, destruction of our prosperity, and destruction of our moral compass. For too long, our controllers have lied, cheated, and stolen their way to the top, only to discover that we, the people, have been left behind in the process. The second road completely destroys the global fiat monetary system, erasing all forms of false wealth, false power, and false governance. It is truly a creative destruction event that has never been witnessed in the history of mankind. All paper and electronic debt forms of wealth will evaporate in the blink of an eye, completely leveling the playing field in order to rebuild our monetary structures from the ground up. It is a lesson to be learned the hard way, but it is a necessary lesson in order to create a new future for our country, a future built on hard work, complete honesty, and goodwill towards others. Down this road, our founding fathers' ideals patiently await our return. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our country is standing at the crossroads. The only question left is which road we will choose. May the road we choose be the right road. Thank you very much.